Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The president of Chad, Idriss Deby, said that his country is threatened by a possible civil war if presidential elections are not held at the scheduled date on May 3rd, in which he is a candidate. Deby said that if the elections are not held on time, there will be a constitutional vacuum and people will not be able to avoid a complete civil war supported by the Sudanese government. As the capital of N'Djamena is preparing for the elections, the president of Chad is waiting for help to stop the encroaching rebels. Russia, China, and Qatar rejected imposing sanctions on the 4 Sudanese nationals who were accused of committing violations in Darfur. However, the United States said it will try to force a public vote on the issue. The 4 men who remain on a British blacklist are officials in the Sudanese government and members of the militia that supports the government. 2 of them are rebel leaders. They are the first people whose names appeared on a list of sanctioned individuals, according to a United Nations resolution passed by the United Nations Security Council a year ago.
The situation is deteriorating in Western Sudan and spreading political chaos. With the escalation of the Darfur crisis and the continued allegations by the president of Chad, Idriss Deby, against Khartoum, claiming that Sudan is supporting rebels there, the Sudanese-Chadian differences have recently intensified. These differences were caused by rebels who shook the Chadian president's regime and almost overthrew it. N'Djamena immediately accused Khartoum of being behind the failed coup. Meanwhile, under international pressure, the Chadian president reversed his decision to expel more than 200,000 Sudanese refugees who are camped out along the Chadian borders. International pressure has been mounting on Khartoum at the UN headquarters in New York. The UN Secretary General Kofi Annan hinted about the possibility that the Sudanese government is involved with supporting the latest rebel movement in Chad, demanding the 2 countries remain committed to the Tripoli Agreement.
What is important is that it wasn't long ago, in February, when the leadership of the 2 countries met in Tripoli to sign a treaty under the auspices of the African Union. I think that the African Union and all the countries of the region and the international community ought to pressure Sudan and Chad to prevent an escalation.
Washington took advantage of its position to demand that the Security Council take action on a resolution that was passed a year ago against those linked to the Darfur crisis. Thus, it called on the Council to approve sanctions on 4 Sudanese officials mentioned on the British list. However, the plan was rejected by Russia, China, and Qatar, the only Arab member of the Security Council.
As far as China believes that this is not the appropriate time to make a decision like this. The Abuja talks are ongoing, and we expect progress there. We must work to make these talks succeed.
From New York to Darfur to N'Djamena, just like an oil spill, it appears that the Sudanese Darfur file is widening, and no one knows how far this problem will expand in the future.
An official source affiliated with the Saudi Ministry of Interior has confirmed that the Saudi authority apprehended a number of misguided youth and seized large quantities of ammunition and documents in a number of locations.
According to the second paragraph of a Saudi declaration issued on February 29, 2004, the Saudi security forces raided a rest area near Al Yarmouk district, killing a number of terrorists on the 28th of the Islamic month of Muharram of the year 1427. The suspects are believed to be involved in the attack on a number of industrial factories in the municipality of Bikaik on the 25th of the Islamic month of Muharram of the year 1427. An official source affiliated with the Saudi Ministry of Interior has confirmed that the Saudi Security Authority arrested 5 other suspects believed to have direct ties with members of this terrorist cell. One of the suspects had several machine machine guns, and ammunition in his possession. The security forces also uncovered and raided the cell's hideout on the 15th of the Islamic month of Rabi al-Awwal of the year 1427. The following items were found and confiscated in the terrorist cell hideout, which was a warehouse located in the area of Slay in the city of Riyadh.
1427 الهجرة، والذي هو عبارة عن مستودع يقع في حي السلي بمدينة الرياض، حيث تم ضبط الآتي: 3 سيارات،
3 vehicles,
123 كيسا من الخلائط،
123 cases of explosive materials and mixtures weighing more than 1.5 tons.
5 رشاشات، 3 بنادق،
5 machine guns,
16 مسدسا،
3 rifles, 16 handguns,
ذخائر
and a variety of ammunitions. A number of telecommunications devices,
آلات تصوير،
cameras and notarizing equipment,
جهاز حاسب،
a computer, 2 video cameras, and several videotapes,
كمية كبيرة من المواد المصورة في أشرطة فيديو، لوحات سيارة،
fake license plates.
بالإضافة إلى التحفظ.
In addition, documents and videotapes containing large quantities of information and data about the terrorist cell and its activities and plans.
لهؤلاء الذين أساءوا لعقيدتهم ووطنهم وجعلوا من أنفسهم أدوات هدم وتدمير في أيدي الحاقدين والحاسدين على هذا البلد الأمين.
Those terrorists who are misguided by enemies of our secure nation give a bad image to Islam and to our nation. They were misled by the devil, which made them believe that their actions were not bad.
ومن ثم تجهيز السيارتين اللتين استخدمتا في الاعتداء بكميات كبيرة.
They prepared explosives by using different tools and equipment. After that, they tied these explosives to inflammatory igniters and packed them into the 2 cars used in the Bikek terrorist attack.
ومن ثم نقلهما عبر الطرق البرية بعد الاستعانة بأجهزة الملاحة.
Then they drove these 2 booby-trapped vehicles using the back roads to the intended target, the Bikek industrial factories. They committed their heinous crime after killing 2 security officers. Their only intention was to kill innocent people and target the nation's financial capabilities. Those terrorists who believe in an ideology that is misguided and erroneous killed Muslims and seized their property in the name of a holy war.
واستباحة دمائهم وأموالهم بزعم أن ذلك من الجهاد.
The bomb will be detonated in the event of the presence of security forces. I have here 2 buttons. The white one is a safe button and the red one is the detonation button.
وقد كفى الله عباده شرهم ورد كيدهم في نحورهم وقيض لهم
We pray to God to shelter us from those evildoers, disrupt their plans, and help us bring them to justice. They will eventually be punished because God does not like evildoers. The Saudi security forces are still investigating this criminal attack, and may God guide them towards the right path.
والله الهادي إلى سواء السبيل.
In Afghanistan, armed operations and clashes continue to erupt between Taliban fighters and the so-called multinational and government-backed forces in the southern and eastern parts of the country.
Clashes continue to escalate between the Taliban fighters and the so-called multinational and government-backed forces in the south and east mountain areas of the country. These regions, where the Taliban regained control over some of its previous positions, have recently witnessed fierce fighting, which was the cause of death of dozens from both sides.
In a number of joint military operations, the Afghani army and the multinational forces continue to pursue and hunt down Taliban fighters who started to gain control over some areas south of the country. These military operations started 10 days ago and they will continue.
According to observers, these military operations are the largest and most extensive this year. The Afghani government failed to bring some of the regions under its control, and it was unable to convince opposition groups to join in. In addition, hard living and economic conditions in Afghanistan have widened the disparity between the government and the people.
Ongoing armed confrontations and military escalation have negative impacts on the average citizen. The violence has also widened the economic gap between local residents living in the countryside and those living in the city. This makes it easier for the Taliban to recruit many of these vulnerable residents. Many Afghanis face harsh living conditions in the name of the so-called free market, which is not helpful to the average Afghani.
These military operations have recently spread over wide regions, especially in the south and southeastern states. Amidst unclear political visibility and domestic problems, this escalation, which has so far killed dozens of people from both sides, is expected to continue spiraling out of control. It has been 4 years since the collapse of the Taliban regime and the US-led war against Kabul. However, recent clashes have proven that the security situation in the country is still very fragile. The government-backed and coalition forces need to re-examine and review the political situation and the military plans in Afghanistan. The Afghani Authority launched an operation to destroy farms growing opium poppy plants in the western region of Herat. It confirmed that it will completely eliminate the growing of opium in these areas, which are used in the creation of the drugs heroin and morphine.
Armed with heavy artillery and missile launchers, the Afghani police and security forces launched an operation to destroy opium poppy fields in western Afghanistan. The Afghani government and the American occupation forces have been criticized for failing or ignoring to combat the growing of opium drugs. Through this operation, they are trying to show their good intentions to the world, especially the West, which is considered to be the ultimate consumer for Afghani drugs.
We are here to destroy opium poppy crops. It is our government's policy to destroy all opium farms and fields. God willing, we will prevail in this war against drugs.
Afghani soldiers appear to be enthusiastic about carrying out this operation. The soldiers used machine guns and sticks to destroy these opium fields. Meanwhile, farmers expressed anger over this operation, confirming that it will kill their only source of income.
My family, which has 20 members, depends on this farm and its crops as a source for living. Why did they destroy my field? We are very poor and we do not know what to do next. I want the government to compensate me for destroying my field. Please do not destroy my farm. I wish you would kill me instead and spare my field.
Abdel Ghaffar's plea has not stopped the soldiers from executing their mission. However, his appeals did address many questions regarding the success of this operation. Destroying these crops will not be effective if the farmers are not provided with alternative sources of income other than the growing of opium.
At the United Nations headquarters, a war of words erupted between the Israeli member and his Palestinian counterpart. Dan Gellerman, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, described the statements by the Palestinian leaders as a declaration of war. The Palestinian observer Riyad Mansour confirmed that Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip are inhumane and a violation of international law.
The outcome of the Security Council meeting, which was supposed to discuss the Israeli aggressions in the Gaza Strip, was not as the Palestinians had hoped for. On the contrary, it served the interests of Israel, which took advantage of the Tel Aviv operation, using it for its own objectives. This session was transformed into a wide-scale condemnation of the operation, increasing pressure on the Palestinian leadership.
It is very worrying, and as you know, I have condemned the attack very strongly. I noted that Palestinian President Abbas has condemned the effort, and I have urged the Palestinian Authority to do the same. But it is important that neither side takes initiatives that put civilians at risk, grave risk as we have seen.
The Tel Aviv operation foiled a proposed resolution by the non-aligned movement. All the Arab countries in the United Nations were going to demand that Israel stop using excessive violence against the Palestinians. Instead of adopting this resolution, the Israeli envoy to the United Nations demanded that the Security Council take action against the countries in the region.
When a suicide bomber specifically targets women and children, it is morally wrong and false. Terror is terror and can never and must never be justified. In front of all this, what will the President and distinguished members of the Security Council do?
Washington rejected the Arab resolution, which condemns Israel. The U.S. Ambassador John Bolton warned that any support of terrorism by the Palestinian government will reflect negatively on the Palestinian Authority.
Israel has the right to defend itself. To condemn Israel for defending itself while failing to acknowledge either provocations of consistent Qassam rocket attacks or the Palestinian Authority's responsibility for failing to take action to prevent Qassam attacks is unworthy for the Security Council.
The Palestinian observer in the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, after repeating President Mahmoud Abbas's condemnation of this operation, called on the international community to act decisively to stop the continued Israeli aggressions against the Palestinian people.
The international community needs to show more resolve in dealing with the situation in Palestine, whether on the ground or concerning the political aspect. The double standards concerning the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories cannot be accepted. This double standard can be perceived as the international community remains silent and directly permits the occupation forces to kill Palestinians and punish them collectively.
The international community acted quickly, but not to stop the Israeli aggressions against the Palestinian people, rather to condemn the Tel Aviv suicide operation. Considering that the United Nations has postponed condemning the Israeli violence against the Palestinian people for a very long time, it reveals a clear double standard policy in dealing with international conflicts.
It's been a decade to the day since Israeli shells down on Lebanese men, women and children taking refuge in a UN peacekeeping compound in Qana, in southern Lebanon, to escape Israeli bombardment from the air, land and sea on their towns and villages, and as the result, the bodies of 102 Arab civilians were shattered to pieces. Israel got away with just a little embarrassment. On the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the massacre, Sidon MP Bahia Hariri said it was thanks to her late brother, former Premier Rafiq Hariri, that the Human Rights Tribunal in Geneva condemned Israel for the crime. More in this report. 10 years ago, on April 18, 1996, over 100 refugees sheltered in a UN safe house were killed by Israeli bombing. 1 week earlier, the Jewish state began its bombardment against Hezbollah, which ended on April 27th. Leading up to the Qana massacre, 17 villages had been flattened. Over 500,000 people had been rendered homeless, more than 200 had been murdered, and hundreds were wounded in what was named as Operation Grapes of Wrath. Entire families were wiped out. Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Shimon Peres, who was granted the Nobel Prize for Peace, ordered the Qana bombing, which killed 102 Lebanese and wounded 100 more. The entire world, with the exception of the White House, condemned this barbaric attack conducted against defenseless civilians. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Nicholas Burns accused Hezbollah of, quote, using civilians as cover. A stance echoed by the Jewish state, which claimed Hezbollah positions and not the UN compound was the intended target of the shelling, and that the compound was hit, quote, due to incorrect targeting based on erroneous data. But according to a UN team, which was appointed to investigate the massacre, stressed, quote, while the possibility cannot be ruled out completely, it is unlikely that the shelling of the United Nations compound was the result of gross technical and/or procedural errors. Following the investigation, the then UN Secretary General Boutros Boutros-Ghali issued a mild UN report putting the blame for the Qana massacre on the Israeli government. As Lebanese commemorated the massacre, President Emil Lahoud said, the occupational force has always known how to escape international justice and United Nations resolutions. Commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Qana massacre last night, the head of state stressed, even though the whole world condemned the atrocity, no one mobilized to judge Israel. For her part, MP Bahia Hariri handed to 10 young girls and boys of martyrs from the massacre an allocation funded by the association to help the martyrs' children. An association which was founded by former Prime Minister Rafi Hariri on April 19, 1996, one day preceding the carnage.
Police went on to maximum alert throughout the country today amid further warnings of terror attacks. Security forces have received 17 specific warnings of potential attacks by terrorists and more than 70 general warnings. Police set up additional roadblocks at entrances to the nation's cities, and security forces increased their presence in entertainment areas, including shopping malls, parks, markets, and synagogues. Meanwhile, 36 people remain hospitalized following yesterday's deadly suicide bombing attack in Tel Aviv's Old Central bus station area. One person is in critical condition, another is in very serious condition, and 8 others are said to have sustained severe injuries. Overnight, doctors fought to stabilize the condition of a 16-year-old tourist from the United States who was critically wounded in the bombing. The American, who has not yet been identified, remains in serious condition. 6 of the 9 victims killed in yesterday's bombing were laid to rest today. IBA's Ellie Wohlgelerntner has this report.
Family and friends shed tears today at the funerals of 6 of the victims of yesterday's terrorist attack. Victor Erez, age 60 from Givatayim, was laid to rest in the Yarkon cemetery. The disabled IDF veteran came to Israel at age 2 from Libya. Erez worked as a taxi driver his whole adult life and had stopped at the Old Central bus station to pick up a shawarma. He leaves a wife, 4 children, and 3 grandchildren. His first grandson was born just 2.5 weeks ago, and Erez was the Sandik at the Brit. David Shaolav, age 29 from Cholon, emigrated with his family from Tashkent 16 years ago. Shaolav studied to be a dental technician and had opened his own laboratory in Cholon. He leaves 2 children, ages 4 and 6, and his wife Ludmila, who was in her 9th month of pregnancy. She had gone to the hospital yesterday morning because she thought she was about to give birth. Philip Alasson, age 45 from Ashdod, had gone to the Old Central bus station yesterday with 2 of his children to buy CDs and computer games. The family was passing by the Rosh Ha'ir shawarma stand when the bomb went off. Alasson, the wounded, hugged his children and then told his son to, quote, call mom and tell her there was an attack. He is survived by his wife and their 4 children, ages 21, 19, 13, and 12. Alasson was buried at the Ashdod cemetery. Lily Yunus, 43 from Oranit, ran a Naamat daycare center. She, her husband, 2 sons, and a girlfriend of one of the sons were on the way to buy equipment for a new business the family was about to establish. The father sat in the car while the rest of the family went inside to get a shawarma. The 3 children were also wounded in the attack and were taken to the hospital. Yunus is also survived by 2 other children. Benjamin Chafuta, age 47 from Lud, was the security guard stationed at the entrance to the fast food eatery at the time of the bombing. He worked as a guard for many years and started working at the shawarma restaurant following the previous attack at the site in January. His sister had asked Chafuta whether he was scared to perform his job. He replied, quote, why would a terrorist want to come for a second time to the same place and carry out an attack?
Meanwhile, security forces continue their crackdown on terrorists in the West Bank and Gaza. IBA's Dennis Zinn has more.
In the wake of yesterday's suicide attack, security forces beefed up the checkpoints along the Green Line and at access points to the main population centers. The police force is deployed to maximum capacity, including 8 companies of IDF reinforcements. An Islamic Jihad spokesman today said, no checkpoint or barrier wall can stop the Palestinian will to fight Israel, and that eventually they do get through. He said his organization has prepared 70 suicide bombers who are waiting to blow themselves up in Israel. At the meeting, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert this morning called with several ministers and the heads of the different security branches. General Security Services head Yuval Diskin said in the last few months, 88 potential suicide bombers were arrested, 11 at the very last minute. Interior Minister Gideon Ezra told Olmert he has ordered the police to take firm action against illegal workers inside Israel, including against their employers. He said that terrorists often infiltrate into Israel under the guise of looking for a job. IDF forces arrested 21 suspected terrorists around the West Bank last night, including the father of the Tel Aviv bomber. And in the Gaza Strip, IDF aircraft hit a metal workshop run by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, reportedly involved in the manufacture of Qassam missiles. In Gaza City, thousands gathered to mourn the death of a man who died in an artillery barrage yesterday. The IDF continues to blast the areas from where the Qassam rockets are launched.
The Russian ship Kaliningrad is on a 5-day visit to Algeria. The ship's crew will conduct meetings and discussions with the Algerian naval forces to strengthen bilateral relations. The Russian captain held a press conference aboard the ship in which he talked about the ship's mission.
سفينة الإنزال الروسية كالينينغراد رست اليوم.
The Russian ship Kaliningrad docked in the Algerian port. This unprecedented event is a bilateral military cooperation aimed at strengthening the relations between the Algerian and Russian naval forces. The Russian ship Kaliningrad, which carries tanks and military equipment, will participate in many naval exercises with other ships. After the Russian ship docked in the Algerian port, the captain and the head of the Russian delegation visited General Mohammed Goulamami, the commander of Algerian Central Naval Forces. The two commanders exchanged symbolic gifts. The Russian captain held a press conference aboard the ship.
بدل الطرفان هدايا رمزية. وعلى متن سفينة الإنزال كالينغراد نشط رئيس البعثة وقائد السفينة لقاء صحفي.
We are here to strengthen our friendly relations and enhance cooperation between the Russian and Algerian naval forces. We will also study the possibility of holding joint training sessions in the future, as well as sharing information and expertise between the two naval forces.
اللقاء تناول برنامج توقف السفينة الذي يدوم.
The meeting also addressed the mission of the ship, which will stay in Algeria for 5 days. Officials from both sides will exchange visits and hold discussions to strengthen cooperation and share expertise between their naval forces. The Russian captain also talked about the duties of the Russian ship Kaliningrad, which will then stop in Tunisia, Spain, and Portugal.
تونس والبرتغال.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. For a transcript of this program, to watch streaming video, or for instructions on how to receive Link TV in the United States, visit linktv.org.